Hello for being here with us today. We're here on a new edition of the Myths of AI. But today, instead of doing some myth busting, we're gonna do something a little bit more special. We're not gonna be talking about AI specifically all the time. We're gonna be talking more about Carla. So, Carla, welcome to our podcast session today. It's a pleasure to be at your office
Thank
right
you,
now.
Michelle. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I see some of your podcasts. I like the content, and I'm very honored to be on your podcast.
Amazing. So, I would like yourself to introduce to the audience,
Okay.
to explain whatever you feel that is relevant for today's interview for them to have a little bit of context.
Okay. I'm Carla Way. I have been in technology since the mid '90s. I've seen the technology evolve a lot since the mid '90s. Recently, I was working over at a high school that works in career technical education and working with some of the technical students there. I worked with them and talked to them a little bit about how the work that I started doing in the mid '90s is actually coming to fruition now. And I find that very exciting to talk about with the students because they believe that they have created AI and their generation is going to be responsible for all of the cool things that are happening in technology. It's emerging so fast and furious right now. But I walked them through some really fun history lessons around how the technology that I was a part of back in the mid '90s and early 2000s created the foundation for what they're able to do today. And I find that very fascinating and very exciting to talk about.
That's very, very interesting. And after that, like, I know you've been involved with major projects globally
Mm-hmm.
that had impact over millions of lives. What do you feel was the most challenging project that you were a part of?
Oh boy. Not so much of a project, but more of a program, if you will, because there were many projects that fed into it. And at the time, it was in the height of the 2008 global recession around a lot of the business banking collapsing, not just the business banking, but the consumer banking, where it was collapsing around us because of a lot of the mortgage defaults and things like that. I was working at HSBC at the time and was responsible for a portion of their compliance portfolio, specifically in the anti money laundering space. And so it was a lot of work around ensuring that we had all of the transaction monitoring correct and can identify the money laundering when it was occurring so that the alerts are happening. There were some challenges with the platform that we had, and we had to it was an interesting project because you had to first do your testing to identify what needed to be remediated. And a lot of times you identify what the problem is that you're trying to solve for, and then you go through the process of fixing it and remediating it as a part of your project. In this instance, there were multiple streams occurring where we had to go in first and run the testing across the platforms to identify what was broken and then remediate and then do it over again. So it was a multi-stream process where we were constantly remediating and constantly testing to ensure that we had the security and we had all of the triggers that were found and remediated everything so that HSBC was no longer in fault of the money laundering issues that were going on.
Okay. So, why was that project so challenging?
Oh, because we were working under such strict and under the microscope of the federal regulators that were wanting to shut the banks down. They it was actually under a deferred prosecution agreement where if we didn't get it right, the head of the company and several of the executives were going to go to jail. So there was a lot of
No room
pressure,
for.
a lot of pressure. So we had regular meetings with the regulators, spent a lot of time in New York working at the headquarters of the bank and working on that. And we pulled them out of a pretty dark time. It was a lot of work, but also I always find it very satisfying to get to the end of programs and projects where you see the difference that you make. We saved a lot of people from not losing their jobs because we were able to successfully move things through and provide regular updates to the regulators that they felt comfortable and satisfied that we were on the right path.
And that's going to bring me to my next question.
Okay.
This is interesting. What was, if you had to choose one of the principles of project management that defined success over that project and previous projects that you did before even project management was project management?
So interesting because I started working in project management back in the 90s at Sun Microsystems. My time there, I was the program manager for one of the Solaris releases. And it was at a time where we...
Sorry, for those of you who do not know, the Solaris servers are a very big thing.
Yes, Solaris was king at the time. Sun Microsystems was acquired by Oracle many years ago. We created Java, and Solaris and Java were working together. So we used to have Java as part of the software bundle of Solaris that was part of the operating system. So,
and it was not called project management, right?
It was. So we were called program managers, but project management back then, if you went out to look for a job in project management, you really weren't going to find it. It wasn't something that you found on the job boards very, very easily. It was something internal at Sun Microsystems that I was able to find. And some companies had the roles, but they were not as widely available to people like they are today. We saw a lot of the standards developed in the 90s and early 2000s. I would say more in the 90s, where project management standards were really developed. And you have your global PMI organization that was developed, and some of the PMP certifications were developed for folks to show that they have applied all of the rigor of what project management should be about. One of the things that, as my career in project management took place, is I became very focused on risk management within project management. And I found that if you really dial into risk management and really look at what could go wrong and looking for ways to avoid those risks from occurring and turning into issues, that you were always aligned with your business and letting them know what was happening. If the business feels like you're just checkboxing through the project and saying, okay, I did this job and this job and this job and this task, that's okay. But if you're constantly looking for what could go wrong and what risks you need to look out for, that lets them know that you are more forward thinking and you're more intuitive on how to prevent those things from happening. And as you become more experienced in project management and within the IT space, especially where you understand the IT foundations of IT, you're able to identify where some of those risks are going to occur. So I think risk management in the project management framework is a very underutilized, and it's not spoken about as much as I like to call it out. I think that it gets lost in the shuffle. It's part of the monitoring phase of project management. And if you're not really focused on it, you can lose sight of your project.
Very, very, very inspiring. So from there to all the work that you've been doing during the last years, you were CTO, CIO, executive director. So you had many hats already
Yeah.
in multiple organizations where you created insane impact,
Mm-hmm.
even saved people from going to jail.
Yes.
What is the one thing that you figure out in the workforce that project management, when risk is correctly tackled, gives back to the organization and the
Mm-hmm.
workforce in terms of growth?
Um, that's an interesting question. I think the value of having the project management and the risk management helps the organization know that they're in good hands. I had one stakeholder one time where I was working on their projects. I had just joined the company. It was at BMO, and I was starting to work on my first project with them. And it was less than a month that I was there, and I was talking to the stakeholder, and he said, I already got you figured out. You're Allstate. And I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? He says, you're Allstate. We're in good hands. And I thought, well, what a great compliment, because apparently the way that I approach the projects with just making the business partners feel like I gotcha, I have your back, everything's taken care of, they just felt secure and safe knowing that I got it covered, and I can take this. They didn't have to monitor over what I had going on. I had that for them, and I would come back on a weekly basis or twice a week, whenever the frequency was, depending on the project. And they knew that if there was something that they needed to know about immediately, I'd bring it forward. If not, things are handled and they'd get their regular updates. But I think, one, you talk about the many roles that I've had, and it's been interesting because I feel like everything is a stepping stone to the next role. And I look at the culmination of my career and some of the roles I've had in the last few years, and I thought, wow, I'd never be a CIO. 10 years ago, if I ever thought I was going to be a CIO, I thought, oh, that's unattainable. But I look at everything that I've done and I see that it's actually all part of the building blocks and the foundations that have just helped springboard me to that next level, each one. And I've had some interesting roles throughout my career that have been a little challenging. Maybe a company that we got acquired by, that it wasn't the right fit, and it wasn't always a pleasant experience. But I look at that as I still learned something, and I looked at every single role, whether it was a positive experience or not, that there was something there that I learned. I've taken something from every single company, every single role, to feed me to the next one. I feel like the stuff I did back in the 90s is still very relevant today.
And regarding that particular angle, today we're entering a new era where being in good hands of somebody is becoming being in good hands of good ensemblement of technology.
Yeah.
And I feel a lot of people are not really happy about AI
Mm-hmm.
being around or used as a tool because it cannot do the job as well as I do it, or
Mm-hmm.
because it makes mistakes like humans make mistakes
Yeah.
also. And in the project management scope that we've been talking about and how it impacts growth of organization when it's done correctly,
Mm-hmm.
how much do you feel today, and what is needed by organizations to do a successful transformation
Mm-hmm.
with all this toolbox that you've developed?
Yeah.
What is this next step that everybody is
Yeah. So
needing today?
transformation is the key. We're in the next generation of transformation for technology. And AI is just a tool that's out there that everybody's using, much like the calculator that replaced the pen and paper. We told kids back in the day that they weren't going to have a calculator in their pocket, and they needed to learn to do their arithmetic and their multiplications and everything on paper. And look at us now. Everybody has a calculator in their pocket. So AI is just that next tool set that we're using. It's a matter of using it responsibly. You wouldn't allow a student to use their calculator to do a math test if they're learning their times tables. But if they're out in the world and they need to do something quickly, it's a tool that's available. You still need to learn the foundations for what you're using AI for, but why not use a tool that's going to make your job easier to do? I'm able to do some works I'm able to do, and I was just putting together some AI frameworks together for a governance committee that I'm putting together, and I could spend several hours trying to draft the charter for this AI governance committee I'm putting together, or I can throw it into ChatGPT or Claude or any of the tools, and it can have it done for me in a matter of moments. And then I think the big key, though, is understanding the hallucination of AI and knowing that it's just pulling from a lot of databases and a lot of sources to give you what you need. I called it initially, I called AI kind of a glorified Google search, because that's what it's doing. It's pulling from everything that is out there that we've been collecting over the past decades of information that's there. It just does it much faster. And so why not use the tools that are available to you, much like we used to use encyclopedias to do book reports? So let's use the tools that are there, but validate the information that it's giving you. And I think that's the piece that is differentiating between your trusted advisors versus individuals that are using ChatGPT to say, I can do this work. So having the foundational knowledge that I have with technology, with the experience, with business, with project management, understanding how you get from point A to point Z in a scope of a program or a project or a transformation that you're going through, knowing that tells you when you put your information into your prompts and it spits back something, lets you know what needs to be adjusted. So a lot of times people think, oh, it's just a cheating tool, and it can be, but that's where you need to teach people the foundations first before they start using it.
It's interesting. And if you would have to embed this project management and risk and AI governance frameworks that you designed for these organizations to execute very high stake projects, how would you configure these frameworks for knowledge graphs inside of the corporation to exist also available for agents, for instance?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just at a conference in June where that was a lot of topics, and everybody seems to be in the same place where they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to understand where we use the agents and where we can trust them. And so again, it's having the experts that can validate the information that's there, having other tools that can monitor your agents in a way to catch those flags. And that's the piece I think that's really, really critical right now in the adoption of AI, is putting your governance and your risk frameworks together. You need to get ahead of it now, because it's, we're letting the tiger out of the cage, if you will, and it's coming fast, and everybody wants to grab whatever tools out there, and they're wanting to use it. And we need to make sure that there's guardrails at every organization that fits within their risk appetite. Some companies will have a higher risk than others, to allow for more free use of AI, versus some companies that are a little more risk averse because they need to be very careful. A, they can't have data leakage. B, they need to make sure that it's not going to expose risks for PII or sensitive information, or feeding back into the tools for the models to use for other people to find information. So there's a lot that needs to be looked at, and taking a look at your shadow AI that is within your organization. People need to get ahead of that, and that's one thing I'm working on right now, is putting together governance frameworks and playbooks that I can help companies put together what it is that they need to be taking a look at. I'm going to be speaking at Visions conference in October, and I think the title is "Don't Let AI govern you. You know, get ahead of it because it's here. And if you don't truly get ahead of it, and if you don't have if you don't if you're not on board with it, it's going to happen whether you're on board with it or not. So you might as well get on board with it and embrace it in a way that fits your appetite for risk.
That's very, very interesting. If you had to define, I know that you are recently in the process of launching Waypoint, that is your advisory group.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
Um, what would you say defines Waypoint advisory group from everything that we talked today
Yeah.
that will help the transformation of companies?
I think having the diverse background that I have with education, with real estate, with some construction, with IT, with banking, financial services, consulting, all of the experience that I bring to the table gives that diverse background and the foundational knowledge so that it's not just a rinse and repeat deck, but rather I'm looking at what is needed for your organization. I have gone through many organizations in my time, and through each organization, the big question is always, how do we prioritize our projects, right? And I've always had an interesting way of looking at it where I'm able to prioritize based on not just your impact and effort scores, which is the typical way that people look at your prioritization, but rather I look at that is one layer, but then I take another layer where I align to the strategy of that particular company and create customized prioritization models for each company to be able to look at how does this work for this company. So going into an organization that had over 200 projects where they only had resources to really staff and support 60 at best, going through in a week's time to be able to truly prioritize by using the model that I developed for that company, I was able to whittle them down to the 60, get them their over under line. Now, the model's always around 80 to 90% correct because you're always going to have those one offs. But instead of trying to fix for that last 10%, fix it for the 80 to 90% and then take a look at the one offs and see where do you want to fit that, above or below the line. And usually it came out where it was pretty accurate, where it was between that 80 and 90%, where you could have the conversation around the line instead of across all 200 projects. And the same thing when I was at the bank, where we were trying to figure out their compliance portfolio. Everything's critical, everything's necessary, but aligning to the strategies and the goals that the company has, that was necessary. And it's the same way with whether it's AI adoption, transformation, whatever you're trying to follow. I think that's where my deep project management knowledge, or I don't know if that's what it is or just the way that my brain is working, that I'm able to go in very objectively and take a look at what's the situation and help really put some guardrails in place and provide frameworks around what is needed for the company in whatever it is they're trying to do.
That's amazing advice. Okay, I don't know if you would like to tell us something else. Like, I feel that this has been a super inspiring conversation. I try not to keep them longer than 20, 25 minutes because it's hard for people to listen to all of it all at once. But I think this was great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Carla, for today.
All right, thank you.